Hi everyone, I'm Dr. RakheeYadav, consultant pediatrician. Welcome to my Friday night live session, and I've decided to go international, go global. I've called up a few friends of mine from all over the world, and I'll be doing live sessions with them to know about their COVID-19 experiences in various countries. So we've got an idea of what's happening outside of Malaysia. So today I have with me Dr. Nevin Fernandez. Hang on, let me just send an invite. So as we wait for Dr. Nevin to join us, so Dr. Nevin Fernandez is basically a senior lecturer with Queensland University, consultant staff specialist, and he's a consultant staff specialist in anaesthesia, and he's currently working in Queensland, Australia. Welcome to my live session, Dr. Nevin.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on it. It's actually my first time on Instagram, so you'll have to be gentle.
It's the first for many.
First of many.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Nevin Fernandez. As mentioned, I'm a doctor. I specialize in anesthetics. I'm a husband to a woman I met at your wedding, Rakhee. I have been your friend for about way too long, 20 years. I am a son. I am a brother. I'm a friend to many. I am a father of two, and those are all the hats I wear, I think.
It's nice to see how you brought me back into introducing yourself. Would you like to tell us how long you've been a doctor? How long you've been into anesthesia?
I've been doing anesthetics for a long time, say about 8 years, and I've been a doctor since 2007, 2008. Thereabouts. It's been a while.
Wow, awesome. So you've been a doctor for a very, very long time. To see your journey as well, and I'm so good at status at the moment. But sad is the fact that anesthesia, I mean, you guys manage the ICU, and ICU is where most of our COVID-19 patients end up, at least in our country. We have a huge number in ICU. So what is the situation there with regard to COVID-19 in Australia?
So Australia is a totally different story to tell compared to the rest of the world when it comes to COVID. I think it's pretty well documented now that we are one of the success stories, in what's been happening. In the last 18 months, we've only had 31,000 cases, which is a very, very small number, and less than 1,000 people dead. 912 deaths as of yesterday. The average age of somebody contracting COVID in this country is about 37, and the average age of somebody dying from COVID is 86. And the mass majority of these patients that are turning up to hospital, only a fraction of them have ended up in intensive care. Now, the success in the way we've handled this pandemic has only been besetted by the laggard in our vaccination rates. So we are, for all intents and purposes, a developed country, but we have one of the slowest vaccination rates in the OECD. Very conflicting. This has been compounded by, the government's initial putting all their eggs into the AstraZeneca vaccine, and then unfortunately finding out that the AstraZeneca vaccine has a very, very rare blood clot risk, and that was sensationalized by media, and then conflicting government messages as well, which has slowed the vaccination rates right down. I think to some extent we are victims of our own success. Life here in Australia is almost as normal, other than the occasional snap lockdown that reminds us that we are in the midst of a global pandemic. There's been absolutely no need to rush to try and get these vaccines. But that's roughly, I think, where we stand in Australia at the moment.
So it's interesting that you mentioned about vaccines, because in Australia you have one of the lowest vaccinated population worldwide. So what are the measures you have in place to safeguard the Australian population? So why are you all so successful? I mean, 30,000 cases, we achieved that in 3 days. Malaysia is top in our numbers at the moment. We're ridiculously high in terms of case number. Our mortality rate is almost 1%. It used to be less than 0.5%. Our case infectivity rate at the moment is about 9%. WHO says, above 5%, you guys are in trouble. We've doubled that to 9%. So what does Australia do different?
There's a few things. I think one, we're very good with snap lockdowns. So there are 5 different states here, and each of the states are run by a premier. And they're almost, when we have a case or a few cases within Australia, within the states, the premiers are almost unapologetic when they make the decision to shut things down. They're swift and they're decisive, and they make no mistakes about what they want to do. I think Western Australia closed its borders once for 5 days after a single case had broken out. New South Wales and Victoria are currently in a snap lockdown as well. In Victoria, it's their 5th lockdown that's happened over the last 18 months. So that's the first thing, the way we've been behaving with the lockdowns. The second thing I think is the border closures and quarantine. Australia is a very, very isolated country, similar to New Zealand. When the pandemic hit, we had about 1 million Australians living abroad. With this current outbreak, this Delta strain that's highly, highly virulent, the Australian government has slashed the return rate of Australians coming back from abroad by 50%. And not too long ago, they were banning people from coming in from hotspots. So Indian Australians were not able to come back as well. But they make very, very strict decisions, and it's for public safety. Now, the public, I think, has has to have some mention here as well. The recognition that there is a problem, the support that to the government efforts has been, near 100% effective. In the 370,000 cases Australians that have returned back, only 10 breaches have occurred. Now, my brother put this really nicely. He said the way coronavirus spreads throughout a country is dependent on 2 things. 1, how dense a population is, and 2, how dense a population is. And I kind of like that saying a lot. Australia has almost a similar population size to Malaysia, but we are on a piece of land that is infinitely bigger. We social distance even without trying, and it's very easy to do things like contact trace and so on. I think the other thing that they've done really well is just very swift. This thing that they've done with swift contact tracing. New South Wales is the first state to do it. It was the gold standard, and there's been very, very few cases where this spread of the virus throughout the community has not been immediately picked up and dealt with, and people have been quarantined. There are apps, there's data being released daily. You're not allowed to go into a cinema here or a restaurant without, QR coding yourself. So it's very easy for the government to then trace people who might have potentially been in contact with somebody who's been in that area. The main measure obviously is the vaccine. At the moment, like I mentioned before, we are extremely slow. Only about 12% of the population have been vaccinated with both vaccines, and 1/3 of the population have received at least 1 vaccine. With the AstraZeneca vaccine, when there was a study that came out recently by a professor, and then they said that 50% won't take the vaccine as long as it's AstraZeneca. So I think we've been so lucky and so blessed that, because we've not had any cases, that we're getting to pick and choose what vaccine we want to have in this country as well. So those are some of the measures I think that we've been taking so far. It's been really successful.
That's amazing. What about dining in restaurants? Are you all allowed to dine in? Is there a certain number of seats for restaurants?
Look, Rakhee, as long as it's a 1.5 meter distancing, and we've had the occasional initial time when we went down into lockdown, we weren't allowed to go into restaurants and sit down. Even recently, at best we could do is just go and pick up food and come back again. But in this country, we have had months where we've had 0 cases. Literally months. Life has been as normal. Occasionally you'd say, well, you're allowed 10 people in a park. It's just stuff that you would just dream of, given what we know about what's happening around the world.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Here it's a lot different. I'll just put it that way. What has been your experience treating patients, COVID-19 patients, in your ICU setting?
Yeah, so I purely do anesthetics. So there's very little in terms of intensive care framework that I'm involved in. When the pandemic initially started, we went through all these simulations. Theaters were converted into intensive care units, and we were drafted into various different roles. We were preparing for the worst, but with the numbers that I told you, nothing's happened. We used to do simulations of, let's say a pregnant woman who was COVID positive, who needed urgent delivery of a baby. And that rush of that woman from, either the emergency department or birth suite all the way through to theater, and all the different teams that would come in, the pediatrician, the obstetrician, the anesthetics, theater staff, nurses. We did these sims over and over and over again, and it came to nothing. I've had, in my hospital, we had 2 patients that were COVID positive. I had no contact with either of them. So, my experience has been a fraudulent one compared to what else is happening around the world. Now, it may still change.
Oh, it's amazing. Like,
yeah. It is absolutely amazing, because you see the stuff that's happening in America. You watch the horror, the way people being looked after, the way doctors and nurses were breaking down, family members being left in ED, left at home, the death rates, the people that can't get intensive care, the way people were fighting for oxygen concentrators in India not too long ago. And it's a horrors that you can only imagine. Here we just don't have that problem.
That's amazing. I mean, it's so wonderful that that's what's happening in Australia. But I know so many people, like you mentioned, Australia is very, very strict with border control. And you mentioned that there's a lot of difficulty coming back into Australia. So what are the difficulties that you see faced by Malaysians or even Australians who have family back in Malaysia, or if they want to return back to Australia? What are the difficulties that they face?
So at the moment, it's extremely tough. Between, you're not able to take that much leave, and wherever you're going to go, you need permission to get out of the country. Then you have quarantine laws in the other country, and then quarantine laws when you're coming back as well. And a lot of this is funded by you, the individual. It's really difficult, given that 30% of people here in Australia, 30% are born overseas. I myself am an expatriate here to this country. 25% more have a parent who was born overseas. So Australia is a migrant country. We were built off the back of migrants, and there's a huge need for us to want to go home and not just be with distant family, even immediate family members as well. But how do you break down Fortress Australia? How do you break down something that is so successful over 18 months? And even with this Delta variant, I've almost no certainty that they're going to get on top of it by the end of the month. I hope not to be proven wrong, but with everything that's happening, there's an 80% approval within Australia to keep the borders shut, and 90% approval of the way the government is actually handling the border control. So I think we realize that we're in a really lucky position, and it's in our best interest that we keep it closed. It means, unfortunately, that it's going to take a lot longer before we get to meet each other again. Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister in Australia, said that he was going to keep the border shut until mid-2022. And then when he was pushed, would he open up by December 2022, he couldn't commit. It's hard to say which direction this is going to take. I would have hoped that at some point the narrative would change, and they go like, look, it's February 1st, let's just pick a random date, 2022. By this stage, all Australians would receive, or at least be offered, the vaccine. It's entirely up to the individual whether they want to take it or not. And then they slowly start opening up the borders, the bubbles, but without closing. We've had these bubbles that have come up with Singapore. There was some suggestion that would happen. New Zealand, it happened for a little bit. And as soon as these cases break out, they shut everything down. And it's because of the vaccination rate. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So, but this is what we have.
If they do change the vaccination to, for instance, a different vaccine, non-AZ, do you foresee the vaccination uptake will increase?
I think so. I think to some extent, look, I think to some extent it will increase. I think there's a general disdain to the AstraZeneca, concern to the AstraZeneca virus. Given the track record of what Pfizer and Moderna have been able to do so far, I think the population want what's best for them, especially given we haven't actually felt the impact of COVID. So they don't want to take something that's going to potentially cause them. Sorry?
Are they vaccinating children in Australia?
Not to my knowledge. I actually don't know what age it gets done to, but I don't think they're vaccinating children. Yeah.
So it's 18 and above for the moment.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't quote me. I'm
Right.
not entirely sure. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. So basically, there's a lot of mistrust in terms of vaccination, and now Australia is opening up in the sense that you can choose the vaccine that you want, and hopefully that will increase the vaccine uptake.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing. They have to get the vaccines into the country, right? So I think, was it Victoria or New South Wales that had pumped in like $50 million into a facility which they're hoping to build the mRNA vaccine, so similar to Pfizer's. They want to start manufacturing it locally because you're going to get, and it makes sense because you're going to get all these variants, and you're going to want to build up on the whatever boosters that are going to come in the near future as well. But that's still going to need a lot more funding than $50 million, and that's not going to be done within the next year. You're still looking, at 18 months before we're even going to get close to the point where we're going to open up.
What about interstate travel? Is that allowed? Like from east side to the west side? No?
So it depends on each of the states. At the moment, with the outbreaks that are happening between New South Wales and Victoria, I don't believe that there's been that implementation yet, but it has happened in the last 18 months. Actually, the reason why...
So it really
Sorry?
So it really depends on the state?
It really does.
Where they're...
The only reason Victoria got into trouble this time around, I believe it was there were two people, removalists, that had moved from New South Wales carrying furniture across the border, and that's how the virus broke out there.
I see. Well, that has been very interesting. I mean, we now know that Australia is very much different than Malaysia, but we're so glad that you guys are safe there at least. I mean, for all the Malaysian Australians, Australian Malaysian, we just hope that you guys can stay as safe as possible, and I hope that there will be some time when we'll all be able to meet each other again. Is there anything that you'd like to say to your friends and family back here in Malaysia?
Why has nobody sent me any nasi lemak?
Probably because they probably can make it fresher in Queensland itself.
I gotta say, I think the only way out. There's a lot of social media and worry about and concerns about vaccines. They have been inherently the safest things that we can do to ourselves, and it's not about the individual. It's about all of us. It's about the moral obligation that we have to take this vaccine. So when offered, I would encourage you guys to take it. You don't even have to look that far back. You look at chickenpox, you look at the HPV vaccine. You don't have to look back as far as polio or measles or mumps or whatever else that has left us. It doesn't, but let's just say there's a small chance that these vaccines do indeed cause like autism, right, or whatever, blood clots. Let's just say it doesn't cause it, but let's just, for argument's sake, let's just say it does. The greater good is still the fact that we don't have to put kids in an iron lung. Like we have eradicated polio. We have managed to do an amazing thing, and this vaccine needs to be met with that same kind of ferocity. We're not going to beat it otherwise. And that's all I got to say in regards to the matter. And I hope I see you guys soon. I love you all, and I miss you guys so much.
We miss you too, Nevin. It was so good to see you after such a long time. I'm glad you accepted to do a live session with me. It's nice to see friends and family, or friends who become family, on my live session, and I'm truly blessed to be a friend of yours. Take care, Nevin. My regards to the family, and stay safe.
You too, Rakhee.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.